I live in what's often called a century home, which is a fancy way of saying it's an old farmhouse that's over 100 years old. And while I love my home dearly and I'm very grateful for it, it has some quirks which I find to be quite interesting. The first being that instead of being heated by a natural gas furnace, it's heated by a boiler, which was the way old houses were heated a long time ago. And the way the boiler works is it pulls water in from the well, it boils it or heats it to a very high temperature, and then pipes it throughout the house. The water travels via the pipes into metal contraptions called radiators. The radiators get very hot and they radiate, thus the name, that heat into the room where they're located. It works pretty well, however, there's a problem. Not all the rooms in my home have radiators. I don't know if the builders ran out of money, so they couldn't pipe water to every single room, or maybe they just assumed that heat from one room would pass into another, but the end result is that some rooms in my home stay cold, or at least not as warm as others in the winter months. In addition to that, I have very, very, very old windows. Single pane glass, wooden frames, and suffice it to say they can be a little bit drafty on the especially cold days. Walking past some of them, I can literally feel a breeze. Others, if I put my hand out towards the glass, I can feel the cold radiating off of them. They do a good job of keeping water out of the house, but that's about it. That said, there is one saving grace. My home has a comical number of doors. It seems like every entrance from one room to another has a door, and I'm constantly opening and closing them to go from one area to the next. Now, in the summer, this can be a bit frustrating, but it's actually a saving grace in the winter. You see, in the old days, people generally only heated the room where they were staying. In fact, it was common for entire portions of the house to be closed off sometimes if it wasn't deemed necessary to use them. So, in the winter months, I strategically close doors, and what that does is it keeps the heat from the radiator in the room where I'm located, so it stays nice and toasty. It also keeps drafts from other rooms from entering into it. So I maintain the heat from the radiator and I avoid the cold air, the drafts, via the closed doors. In this way, in spite of some rooms not having radiators and in spite of my windows being drafty, I'm able to stay comfortable throughout the winter months. Now, what I have found is that Buddhist practice is very much like heating an old home, maintaining our feeling of inner peace, our feeling of contentment, of happiness. Very similar. We must engage in practices that generate that feeling of peacefulness and contentment. We must also give ourselves permission to close the door on things that would take that feeling away from us. This all ties into the sixth tenet of the Noble Eightfold Path of Buddhism, known as right effort. And right effort simply means that we work to engage in practices that generate wholesome mind states, and we avoid practices that create unwholesome or unhealthy mind states. So, put simply, we do things that create a feeling of inner peace, and we avoid things that create feelings of anger and anxiety. Now, how we do that is up to us. Buddha, in his infinite compassion and wisdom, trust us, trust you, and your inner wisdom, your ability to discern right from wrong, to figure out what to do and what not to do. However, he does give us tools that can help us in that decision making. Now, I'll share some practices that I use in my own life to protect and maintain my own inner peace, but first, I want to talk about the tools. First off, if we look at teachings like right speech and right action, also tenets of the Noble Eightfold Path, I find that they can be helpful in garnering feelings of inner peace. I find that when I am kind and thoughtful towards other people in my speech, saying please and thank you, giving compliments, yes, it's good for them, they like it, but there's also a blowback effect. There's a warmth I feel. I've done something nice for another human being, and I feel nice in return. If I'm helpful towards another human being, whether that's helping to clean up after a party or helping a coworker with a project, again, obviously it's nice for them. They enjoy it. But it's also nice for me. I can go to sleep that night knowing I did something good for someone else. So that's a way that we can generate warmth through right action and right livelihood. But how do we close off the cold drafts? How do we know what's not good, what's damaging towards our own inner peace? Well, the tenet of right mindfulness can be helpful in this aspect. When we practice right mindfulness, we pay attention to our emotions, our thoughts, our body, and our environment. And as we pay attention to those four things, we pay attention to our mind as a whole and what's going on in there. If we're feeling angry, if we're feeling anxious, it can be helpful to look around and ask, well, what's going on that's bringing on this mind state? Am I engaging in media that's unhelpful to me? Am I around people that are negative and frankly unkind? If that's the case, we can close the door on those things, remove ourselves from the situation, stop engaging with that media. And in doing so, we protect our inner peace. We close off the cold drafts that are coming into our mind in the same way that someone might close a door to close off the cold drafts that are coming into a room. Now, myself personally, when I am working to maintain my own inner peace, I find that going outside is an easy way to generate warmth, to generate contentment in myself. I don't know why, I don't know what the difference is, but for some reason the air outside is always sweeter, is always a little bit better than the air inside. So spending time in the garden, spending time going for walks in nature is one simple way to regulate my nervous system and generate feelings of contentment within myself. I've also found that when I am engaging with media, it's very important that I watch my mind and what's happening therein. Do I feel happy? Do I feel content? Do I feel relaxed? Or do I feel angry, anxious? Do I find myself shaking my fist at the screen? Now, if the emotions from the media are negative, that's not necessarily, That does not necessarily mean that we need to shut it off immediately. If it's something that's going on locally, something that we either need to be aware of or something that we can do something about, then sure, we still engage with it because we need the information. However, in my own life, what you do, obviously, is of course up to you. What I've found is that if it's something I can't do something about, and it's not something that is important to my local area, generally, I choose to shut it down. Because all I'm doing in that respect is destroying my own inner peace and not putting myself in a situation where I could be helpful or useful to other people. When we engage in these practices, right action and right speech to generate warmth and inner contentment within ourselves, when we utilize right mindfulness to determine what's harmful and what's helpful to our own inner mind state, what we're able to do is protect and create peace, not only just within ourselves, but with other people as well. Amitabha.